We are world champions! World champions!
Hello, welcome to Hot Lap. It's dead late at night because I've been trying to make this all work a little bit better, and as you can see by my strange hand, it's not working great. It's not working great at all. I'm going to try and fix it so it works better. But there you go. It's late, and I can't be bothered waiting for it to try and get any better. So just bits of me, maybe my chair, not that chair keeps coming and going. So technology. Anyway, we had a so-so Grand Prix. It wasn't the most boring Grand Prix I've ever watched. There was some great action in the midfield. Lewis kind of run away and hid. There was some fireworks. It wasn't bad. Like, I know I've seen a lot of stuff on the thing. I know I tweeted halfway through the race saying it needed a safety car, or coming towards the end of the race needed a safety car. That would have spiced it up, but it wasn't the worst Grand Prix I've ever had. So there's some interesting stuff coming for it. I didn't do anything last week as far as videos goes. I was going to do a video on how excited I am about Fernando Alonso coming back. I am very excited about Fernando Alonso coming back. I will talk about it a little bit later, as we'll talk about a Renault and Racing Point story a little bit later on as well. So we'll do the usual thing of run through the drivers top to bottom or bottom to top, and then we'll talk about those little bits, and then I can go to bed, and you can do whatever you're doing. Anyway, Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc had a coming together on the second lap. Was it? No, first lap. First lap, they didn't get round, did they? Yikes. It's not ideal, especially when you're trying to evaluate whether new parts works. That's not going to be very good at all, is it? It's not going to be good for anybody anyway. I don't know why Charles Leclerc felt he had to get past Sebastian as fast as he did. Unless he just thought maybe he'd already seen the race paces and knew that Seb had the hand on him in race pace, or maybe it was completely the opposite. Maybe he knew he had the pace in race pace. He didn't want to be held up. Either way, reckless maneuver completely did Ferrari, didn't it? Properly did them. So I don't know. I don't know what Mario Binotto will do. He can't be too harsh on Charles Leclerc because he's going to be the guy that's in the car next year. It's, Vettel, I don't think he expected much from the race because he seemed very calm about it in the interview afterwards. So I think he wants to leave that team. I think he wants to leave that team really quickly. I saw on the coverage of Sky that apparently Sebastian Vettel has requested an interview with Martin Brundle. Who knows why? When Martin Brundle said, "Well, what would you like to talk about?" his response was, "Anything you want. I'm quite liberal these days." So I feel like Martin Brundle's going to get the opportunity, should he take it, to put Vettel to task a little bit about how he feels Ferrari's gone wrong, where he's gone wrong in Ferrari, what his plans are for the future. He's openly said that he would like to go back to Red Bull. He also said that the Racing Point is a good car. He's been seen with the Red Bull boys in their around their paddock area, giving zero fucks about the bubbles, I take it. He was talking to Lawrence Stroll this afternoon being Sunday after the race. So who knows? Apparently, Dr. Helmut Marko flew in for this race. He was chopping in. He is reported, although the team have denied it, that he's told Dietrich Mateschitz, isn't it? He's the boss of Red Bull. Dr. Helmut Marko is the driver, hunter. Yeah. So Dietrich Mateschitz, he helicoptered in, and he told Helmut Marko to bring Sebastian Vettel home. That's what the report was. The team has denied it. We shall see, because we'll talk a little bit later on about Red Bull drivers and what's going on. Anyway, I felt sorry for Seb. I want to see him do better. I don't really care about Charles Leclerc. You guys know that. I don't really care about Ferrari. I want him to do better because I quite like the guy. Anyway, Ocon, good qualifying session. He did a similar job to George Russell in where he did. He had an outstanding wet qualifying. Let's put it that way. And he was well ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. We know, or he's still well on top of him, I should say. He seemed to have the legs on him for most of qualifying. In the race, however, it wasn't quite as good, was it? He held Daniel Ricciardo up and then had to retire because of overheating issues. Same overheating issues Daniel Ricciardo had to retire because of last week. So there's obviously some sort of fundamental problem in Renault there that they need to get on top of. Other than that, Renault pace wasn't too bad. I don't think there's a lot separating them and McLaren. That's a real positive. It's a positive for McLaren because they've still kept the momentum building that they have done, but it's a positive for Renault as well because they've made the headlines with having Fernando come back next year, this, that, and the other. But if they know now, you get Fernando Alonso in your car, he's going to tell you and the world if it's going wrong. So they're under pressure to sort that out. And I think it might be the pressure that Renault need. Don't forget they're a factory team. People underestimate Renault. They constantly underestimate Renault. I don't understand. Well, I do understand because they haven't been doing as well as they should do. But the resources Renault have, they can still turn it around. They're a championship winning team. We've seen it. Don't forget, there was a time where Mercedes, we would talk about Mercedes going the amount of money they're putting in, and the cars weren't doing it. And you had Rosberg and Schumacher in the team. Even when Hamilton joined the team, we wondered what he was doing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be at the bottom just because you're at the bottom already. Just because you're not at the top doesn't mean you won't be at the top tomorrow. And rule shake-ups generally tend to fall in the favour of the teams that aren't at the top, or at least the team that's at the top. It doesn't tend to carry over well into huge rule changes. So I think people judge Renault too quickly, and I think people are judging Fernando's move to Renault too quickly. We'll have nothing to talk about Fernando later. We can talk about him some more, I suppose. He's a good man to talk about. Latifi, fairly quiet race. He had a bit of a stuffy qualifying. He looked like he could also have managed to scrape himself into Q2 at some point, but just didn't work out for him. George Russell finished ahead of him. They were both 2 laps down. A fairly muggy race for Williams, wasn't it? I don't know what happened to George Russell, who we might as well talk about now. He was 16th. I know he went off and then he was at the back of the grid, and that was him in Renault in Williams territory. I wonder whether he was just pushing too hard, trying to keep up with cars that his car wasn't capable of keeping up with. But again, just his qualifying alone was phenomenal. So he had a good weekend regardless of finishing position during the race. Pierre Gasly, a fairly innocuous race from him. He was 15th. Same with Giovinazzi. Romain Grosjean, again, it was just good for Haas to finish the race. They both came home 12th and 13th, but it's not what we expected from Haas, is it? They came in so well. They managed to do the buying the bits they could off Ferrari. I think last year's harmed them so much. It's put them so much on the back foot that I do wonder when they can fix it, to be perfectly honest. I wonder if they'll be on the grid next year. I think the only thing that could keep them on the grid is the budget cap and it would be so bad for a team to fall out of Formula One right now, when if these rules do close the field up, it could be good for anybody. but we'll just have to wait and see. Kimi Räikkönen, again, he outperforming the Alfa Romeo probably a little bit. Finishes in 11th, but just out of the points. This is probably not what Kimi wants to do for his last season. It's not what we want to see from like a brand like Alfa Romeo in Formula One. We probably want them a bit further up the grid. But again, the Ferrari teams, when we talk about Haas as well, since the teams have decided, since the FAA have decided that maybe their engine needed a bit of looking into, they haven't done well. So, the teams that were already struggling a bit, struggling even more, aren't they? Daniel Kvyat, points for AlphaTauri even. Good race from him. I see Pierre Gasly being down in 15th because he had a really good qualifying session. So I must jump back to this. I noticed when the two Ferraris came together that there was a bit of debris hit Gasly's car. He was sort of off on the runoff area on the exit of turn 1, and I wonder if that damaged his car because it all unravelled for him, and then he was at the back of the grid, and then he was like a minute behind at one point. So I don't know whether he needed a pit stop to get some debris just unlodged. I must say I've noticed this in the last two races. Sky as commentary I don't know whether it's just a back at the races thing, and maybe this happens every year, but we're not quite used to it, and it's usually Australia, so we're all excited. So I don't know whether this sort of thing usually happens, but Martin Brundle and Crofty seem to be struggling to get like information out. Like sometimes there's things seem to happen in the race where all of a sudden you look at the running order and you go, how is he down there and that far behind? And you feel that a commentary team should be telling us these things. I shouldn't be sat here not knowing what happened there. Of course, you could say you should be doing more research, Lee, and you're probably right. But I had fuzzy head to try and book around with, didn't I? Oh well. Who have we got next? Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz 9th. Good drive from Carlos Sainz. More good points from McLaren. It's great to see McLaren back up where they should be, or fighting for points instead of being stuck at the back of the grid. Still room for improvement. I think they're probably looking about the 4th fastest car at the minute. Or they were the fourth fastest car today, I think. Daniel Ricciardo in the Renault 8th. Good race from him. Kind of done over a little bit on Stroll for the end there, when Stroll essentially decided, if you try and take the corner, Daniel, we are going to have an explosion of a car crash. Which is a shame because Lance had a pretty good race, and he's showing that with a car that's sort of capable, he's an average F1 driver. That's a massive improvement on what we thought he was, which was just a rich kid that someone had bought a team for. So yeah, I rag on people sometimes, but I don't ever want to see anybody. Maybe I want to see Charles Leclerc fail. I certainly want to see Ferrari fail. Most people I don't want to see fail. Antonio Giovinazzi, I probably want him to fail as well because he just doesn't seem like he should be there. But most of them, I want them to do well. So yeah, it was a shame for Ricciardo. He would have probably got Stroll and disappeared off into the distance, but he didn't. So anyway, Stroll finished 7th. I believe he will lose that. If he doesn't lose the position later on, if there's not some sort of review, he'll definitely have like a grid drop for the next race. Like something's going down there. Like it's, I think 5 places. 5 places seems fair. If there was contact, it could have been more, could have been harsher. I think it might be maybe 5 places and maybe a point or something on his license. That wouldn't surprise me because it was Daniel Ricciardo that stopped them having a massive accident there, not the other way around. Sergio Perez 6th because he tried to have exactly the same accident with Albon as Albon had with Lewis Hamilton. I don't dislike Albon by any stretch of imaginations. He seems like a lovely bloke, but I still think it would have been hilarious if he had the same accident again. I'm sorry, I'm a bad human being, but I just think it would have been funny. Lando Norris finished 5th, and essentially his last lap of that race was the most exciting lap of the race. I mean, he started with a grid drop. He started behind Sainz. He finished what would it have been? I can't work that out quite in my head. 10 seconds, something like that, ahead of Sainz. You know, I hope this goes on to Hungary because I like Lando. Again, not because I don't like Sainz, but Lando needs to get on top of Sainz this year because he needs to go into next year and he needs to make it Daniel Ricciardo's mission to beat him, not that he has to prove he can beat Daniel Ricciardo. I think if he beats Sainz, that's halfway to making it. So Daniel Ricciardo's walking into his team. If Sainz finishes ahead of in the championship of Lando Norris and comfortably beats him like he did last year, it's kind of going to be like, oh well, you've employed me to fill in for Carlos, and like I'm Daniel Ricciardo, so like I'll be number 1 and Lando can be my number 2, like he was kind of being number 2 by Carlos Sainz. So I think he needs to get on top of him. I think he's doing everything he needs to do. He's 3rd in the championship at the minute. You know, I wouldn't have thought it would last that long, but it's great to see. Yeah, I'm so happy for Lando. Albon finished 4th. Now that should be a decent finish, really, but he was 44 seconds behind Max Verstappen. Maybe he wasn't 44 seconds behind, but he was. I think he was 44 seconds behind before the pit stops. Can't remember. Anyway, it was enough for Max Verstappen to pit to get new tyres to try for the fastest lap. That's not right, I'm afraid. And in Red Bull teams, that's sackable territory, or, like we talked about before, possible replacement with Sebastian Vettel. They won. I thought Albon this year would have actually been hassling Max Verstappen. I thought Max would have the outright pace to beat him, but I thought he would be with him. You know, look what happened to Gasly. You know, Gasly didn't get a lot of goes. He didn't get a lot of goes before they ended up replacing him. I don't think Albon will be replaced this year, but I've got a funny feeling he'll be in Daniel Kvyat's Toro Rosso, and I think Sebastian Vettel will be back with Red Bull. Christian Horner has said Sebastian Vettel is definitely not going back to Red Bull. Definitely not. So it's probably right that he's going to go back to Red Bull because Christian Horner lies a lot and he's very manipulative. I don't mean that in a bad way, but, you know, it's just one of those things. Anyway, Max Verstappen was 3rd. Couldn't really attack the Mercedes. You saw when the first pit stops happened, he was frustrated. You know, he knew where he was. He knew where he was going to be for the whole race. It's a shame. It's a shame for him. But at the end of the day, you can't. You can't fight someone when you haven't got the machinery to do it. He did a valiant job. So far ahead of Albon for the whole race. You know, he was kind of in no man's land. It always looked like Bottas eventually was going to get him. Great defending when Bottas actually did him. Absolutely great defending. Anyway, it just wasn't his day. Valtteri Bottas, similar. He had a bit of a Valtteri Bottas day. He had a Valtteri 1.0 day. He was just there. He was in third. He was where the car could be, and eventually that car took him past Max Verstappen into second place. He still leads the World Drivers' Championship, but he needs to pick it up more like he did in the first race to make this work. I can't help but think the problems that Mercedes had actually helped him in the end last weekend, because before the problems happened, like Lewis looked like he was gonna have a go, didn't he? So anyway, Lewis Hamilton, absolutely perfect weekend. Really, he dominated qualifying, the 1.2 seconds ahead of everybody. Ridiculous pace. I mean, even when you take the rain into consideration, he's just insane. It's insane that you could be that quick, that far ahead of second place. I know Max Verstappen was going to go quicker, but the point here is he couldn't, because he couldn't keep it on the track. He overdrove and spun, where Lewis kept it on the black stuff. It's just unreal, like an absolutely unreal performance in qualifying and a serene win. He never looked like losing, did he? From the minute he started that race, he never looked like losing. Quickly, Fernando Alonso, it's good he's coming back. I'm very excited. Formula One should be about having the best drivers in the world. He is certainly one of the best drivers in the world, if not the best, maybe still. We'll see. Renault needs to give him a car. He's apparently told Renault that he's not interested about in next year, and he wants them to fully focus on 2020. I think that is the best thing that a team like that could do. I wonder how many teams will be doing that. I wonder how much like testing you could do in a season for the next year. But there's been a lot of stuff talked about Fernando Alonso these days. A lot of people go on about him complaining when he was in McLaren, and complaining about Ferrari. Let's not forget, he held Ferrari on his back during those years, and he got that car to positions it shouldn't have been in. And it's not like it's just Fernando. Vettel came close to winning the championship, like Fernando did in the Ferrari, and then Ferrari have just fallen apart. Like they fell apart when Alonso was there. If anything, Seb's had the better years probably, but they've still fell apart in the end. Ferrari got massive problems. If you're a Ferrari fan, I really do pity you, because it's not going to get fixed overnight, because they don't even know what their problems are. I don't think they just keep throwing drivers at it. What they did with James Allison, it was the biggest mistake Ferrari ever made. We'll have to wait and see for the new regs to see what Adrian Newey can come up with. But you have to start talking about James Allison in the same breath as an Adrian Newey. You have to, because he just seems to be able to make these concepts for these cars, like DAS and stuff. It's maybe it might not have been him that's came up with the DAS system, but at the end of the day, it's his name that's on the car, and that's the name that's going to be remembered. Like Adrian Newey has 100 other underlings, but it's Adrian Newey's name you remember. It's Adrian Newey's that people will always talk about when it comes to those cars, and it's James Allison that we will talk about when it comes to the championship-winning Mercedes cars that he's designed. The quick thing we had before I let you go, and I have to go and sort all this stuff out before I can go Betty Bose, and I'm getting old now. When you're listening to this on Monday, I'm 38 years of age. It's my birthday on Monday, the 13th of July. Anyway, the Renault have... The Renault, or should I just say Renault? Renault have put a formal complaint in about Racing Point. Now, there's been a lot of people say online about how this is bad sportsmanship from Renault, and it very well could be. They're a bit upset, aren't they? They're upset that Racing Point have got a quicker car than them. Sam Collins from F1 TV did put a great thread on Twitter about this. I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts because he talks about possible violations. He said, in the case of outsourcing of design, such as third parties shall not. Sorry about that. In the case of the outsourcing of design, such third parties shall not be a competitor or directly involved with a competitor. So that's fine because Racing Point have given their designs over to show that they've done it. And what Renault would have to prove is that it's not just them looking at photographs of the Mercedes, that Mercedes have physically given them help to build that car or information. That would be against the rules. What it is interesting is they could approach this from an intellectual property standpoint, because apparently it's happened in the past. It happened with the 1987 Arrows and the Shadow ND9. Pretty cool looking cars, I'm going to say. One's gold. But from reading this quickly, what it seems is that it was in the UK courts, which is how we think this will go because it's what happened last time, is that if something was found to be more than 70% identical, it was deemed as an infringement of copyright. So if Renault if this goes further and it goes to court and Racing Point's car is deemed to be 70%, or at least like the top aero parts of it, more than 70% like identical to the Mercedes, that it would essentially be Mercedes property, which would mean that they would have to either redesign the car or revert back to the old aero spec. I believe that's what he's trying to say. That would fuck Racing Point. It would fuck them this year. It would fuck them next year. I know people don't want to see teams get. They don't want to see teams get like done over. And I'm sorry because I know there's going to be a lot of people disagree with me here, but you know I'm here for it. That's what I'm here for. It sits wrong with me somewhere when I'm watching Perez and I'm watching Stroll up there, when I know the extra work that McLaren and Renault have done, but Mercedes are ahead because they're using stuff from Mercedes that Mercedes designed last year. It just doesn't sit right. It almost feels tarnished. It feels like they're not like Ferrari. If Ferrari would have all the pole positions Ferrari had last year, and then it found out we think they were cheating with the engines because they won't release what agreement was came to. I don't think it's right. And I know it's just within the rules, isn't it? It's just a grey area. This is the thing. People keep saying, well, if it's within the rules, it's within the rules. They're not breaking any rules. Right, yeah, then they're not breaking any rules, but they are bending them to the point that the middle of the rules, the middle here, right here, the middle of the rules is like really white when you try and do plastic just before it snaps. That's what they're doing with the rules. And I feel bad thinking about it as well, because I want them to do well, and I want Aston Martin to do well, and I like the idea that they've got essentially 2 free design years, so they can be working on the 2022 car, so Aston Martin can hopefully come in and be like a real contender. I think if everything goes the way it's going for them right now, I see no reason why they can't be fighting for wins in 2022 if they've had all this lead up, and we know they can build a car. I think that's the annoying thing. We know Racing Point are a team that have worked on a low budget for so long. I just want to see what they can do with a budget, and this is giving them the breathing room, I suppose, to do something like that. But it's still not. It's just not right on the teams that are underneath them. and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I would imagine it's going to be so difficult to prove anything to make it so, and given the fact that Mercedes will probably, well, they will be on the side of Racing Point, trying to essentially prove that it's nothing to do with them. That I don't think anything will come of it, but I'll be interested to see if McLaren jump on this as well, because it's in their interests too. It's in their interests. It's in everybody underneath and even Red Bull. When we get to different tracks, there's going to be different tracks where that Racing Point is a real thorn in the side to Red Bull. I think that's the other thing you've got to remember. It's not like Racing Point just come up with this brilliant idea. It's like, oh, we can copy the aero on the Mercedes, and then that'll make us super quick. And no, Mercedes have thought, if we make a lower team, a partner team, they're going to be in the way of the ones behind us. So, again, who knows? Anyway, thanks for listening to the Hot Lap. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching the Hot Lap. I hope the sides of my head and my disappearing chair wasn't too fuzzy. If you want to support the podcast or support anything I do with Must See Audio, the Hot Lap is a Must See Audio podcast. Go to Must See Audio on Patreon, sign up to one of the tiers. Keep saying they're all the same. Think of it as a tip jar. You will get some extra stuff, and you'll get some early stuff. Anyway, now we'll put all that to bed. Come and follow me on Twitter, actually. If you're not already following me on Twitter, I imagine most of you already are. If you're not, I'm at a total shunt on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm addicted to it. I'm not happy about it. Managed to cut Facebook out pretty much, but Twitter I still feel a little bit addicted to. And I will speak to you next week after the Hungarian Grand Prix, unless something explodes in the middle of the week, and I'll put a YouTube video up, and I'll try and use my YouTube channel more. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
We are world champions! World champions!